Hey there, folks. As I just told you, we now, you talk about breaking news. We don't often do breaking news or that kind of stuff, but we right now have our friend Jason Jones on, who is at this moment, right now, in Bethlehem, not Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Bethlehem, the actual Bethlehem. Jason Jones, welcome back.
Eric Metaxas, it's great to be on your show from the place where our Lord and Savior was born.
Came into time and space.
Yeah.
Mind bending. Okay, we yesterday, get this incredible news. I hate to use the word incredible, in that way. Like, oh, it's incredible. Incredible literally means unbelievable. It's not unbelievable, but it's extraordinary. Extraordinary news that because of Donald Trump, of course, there is a ceasefire in the Middle East. Holy cow. Praise God. What's your view? What's going on there?
Wait a second. You don't wait. President Biden didn't give us this peace deal, Eric Metaxas.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine the egg on the face of Joe Biden and his handlers? Seriously, I mean, it is so humiliating that Trump comes in and great stuff starts happening even before Trump officially takes office, which he will do by God's grace in a few days. But it's got to be humiliating. The Biden administration, look, we know they're pathetic. We know they're ineffective. We know that, when Kamala Harris, tried to broker peace in Ukraine, like the next day, Russia starts bombing. I mean, they are not merely incompetent. They are a profound embarrassment to the United States of America. So this has to be humiliating to Joe Biden. And I have to say, in terms of historical antecedents, I remember in the first days of 1981, I was a freshman in college at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, when Ronald Reagan was inaugurated and the hostages were released, something that Jimmy Carter could not do for over a year. And because of Reagan somehow back channeling, he gets it done. Trump tops that by getting stuff done before he's even in office. It's anyway, look, it's enough said on that. But my question to you is, what is your view of this? What is actually happening there?
Well, I'm very grateful. And I've been in the region for a bit, and I'll be here most of the next 90 days. Our organization, the Vulnerable People Project, has been really focusing on what we call ecclesiocide, or the destruction of Christian communities around the world, especially those first century Christian communities from India across the Middle East into Africa. I was in the region because we're delivering aid trucks to the Christian communities in Gaza. But I took time away from my organization leading up to the election to campaign in Pennsylvania to the Middle Eastern Christian community, where I promised them, I said, Trump is our best bet to preserve the ancient Christian communities of the Middle East. Met with the Muslim communities across Pennsylvania. And if you look and I published an article at the American Conservative after the election called Gaza Saved America. It was how Biden bumbled and fumbled in the Gaza war
You
that I
forgot
really
stumbled.
stumbled. He
Yes, he
stumbled,
stumbled, he bumbled, and he fumbled. He did all
fumbled.
three, which is
He did
very
all
rare.
of them. And he did all three. And I think that played a big role in Trump's victory. And so I just had an article that came out at American Conservative this week that said Trump saved Gaza. And so you're looking at this ancient Christian community in northern Gaza. 50% of the community has been killed or have fled since the war started. 100% of the churches have been destroyed. And Trump did something exactly the opposite of what Biden did. Biden played footsie with Netanyahu and he played footsie with Hamas. And Trump came in and he was tough to both sides. He was demanding to both sides. He did exactly what he said he was going to do during the campaign. He said he would end this war. And as an organization that works in and around war, this war has been specifically catastrophic and counterproductive for Israel. Hamas, we now know, Blinken said it yesterday, is larger than when the war started. So you have almost 50,000 KIA civilians that were killed in Gaza, over 20,000 children killed. And now what do we get for it? Hamas is larger than ever. The ancient Christian communities have been decimated.
Now, hold on a
Hundreds.
second. I've got to challenge you on that. How is Hamas larger than ever? I don't believe that the IDF, in doing all they did, would allow Hamas to go. I just don't get that. Where does this come from?
Recruiting. The war became the great recruitment tool for Hamas. And so this is Blinken's own statement. So take it or leave it. I don't know. I hope it's not true. But Blinken yesterday said Hamas has all of their losses on the battlefield, they've been able to more than make up with recruitment. Remember, when you have 50,000 civilians killed, 20,000 children killed, tens of thousands of children who've had their limbs blown off, this becomes a pretty useful recruitment tool. So Israel's security has been undermined by this war. The ancient Christian communities of Gaza have been decimated. And President Trump came in and did exactly what he said he was going to do, exactly what he promised in Michigan, and exactly what he promised in Pennsylvania. So for me, with the work that we do at the Vulnerable People Project, knowing that the Christians in Gaza have been living off of less than 600 calories a day now for a year, it's a very hopeful time. And I plan on being here at least for this week, and then I have to go back to the States, but I'm going to be turning right around because we're going to be working on providing a post-traumatic treatment to the women, children, and orphans in Gaza.
Why wouldn't the Christians get out of Gaza?
They find that really offensive. They were there when my ancestors were still in Norway. These are the descendants of the Jews that accepted Jesus Christ. Their families have been there forever. I was just with one Christian family today. Their family is from Gaza. They've been there since before the time of Christ. They divided their family up and they put them in two separate churches. Half the family went into the Orthodox Church. Half of the family went into the Catholic Church. They did that because they wanted to make sure some of the family members survived. Unfortunately, both sides of those families died when each of those churches were attacked by the IDF.
Well, this is what I don't understand, Jason, because if you're in the middle of a war zone and it's possible that you will die because of bombing, why wouldn't you get out? Doesn't mean you can never go back, but
No, it does. No, Israel does not. The problem is because they're Palestinians, the Christians, if they leave, are not allowed to return. So they are really petrified to leave Gaza. In fact, I received
not allowed by whom?
By Israel.
Why not?
That's the deal. In fact,
I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I think it's unjust, and I think it's systematic ethnic cleansing. And it's really hard.
You think Israel is trying to get rid of Christians in Gaza?
In fact, I quote in my article at the American Conservative, is Israel officials close to Netanyahu furious with Trump because they said they felt that they were very close to being able to block all aid and take control of northern Gaza. The Christians in Gaza all live in northern Gaza. We now know that they're dwindling down to almost nothing. And I think it is hard for people in our culture to understand. I would just leave. I moved my home state of Hawaii because of COVID policy. So it's really hard for us to understand why people would insist on staying when they're suffering so horribly. But when the war first started, the Vulnerable People Project began evacuating the wounded into Egypt. And there were Christian leaders from the region that were very upset with me and said that I was helping to facilitate ethnic cleansing. And I promised that I would only.
I hate when people throw these terms around like ethnic cleansing. Moving out of some place, that's not ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing is systematic murders, genocide.
Well, that's genocide, Eric. But let's give me an example. It's been a horrible couple of years. The Biden administration was horrible for the Christian communities. We saw in Artsakh, the ancient Christian community of Artsakh, Armenians, they were 120,000 Christians were ethnically cleansed from Artsakh. They weren't killed, but they were cleansed from the region, gone forever. Their churches that go back to the 3rd century were destroyed. In India, where we have 1st century Christian churches, St. Thomas himself planted churches in India when he went to the Jewish communities of India. And one state alone in India, 340 churches. 2 years ago, 280 of those churches were destroyed. So I think the church in the West really needs to raise its voice, leverage our power, leverage our influence, and say that we as Christians in the West will not tolerate ecclesiocide. We will not tolerate the cleansing of Christians, whether it's in Nigeria, whether it's in South Sudan or in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan, whether it's in in India, and India right now is a menace to the church. And the church in the West has been more or less silent. When under the Bush administration, we saw most of the Assyrian Christians, again, a first century Christian community, was ethnically cleansed during the Bush administration after the invasion of Iraq. We see now in Syria, it's the reason I'm in the region. We see now the former Islamist extremist with Al-Qaeda ties is now running Syria. What's going to happen to these ancient Christian communities of Syria? Nine out
Hang
of
on,
10.
Jason. Sorry, we're going to go to a break. Folks, we'll be right back talking to Jason Jones. Very important conversation. Back, folks, talking to our friend Jason Jones. Jason, this is all disturbing stuff, but it's complicated. In other words, I want to be clear. There are plenty of places around the world. India is one example. They don't believe in religious freedom. What we have here in America is so rare and beautiful, and patriots have died for religious liberty. The idea that you do not have to believe as I do. I totally disagree with your beliefs, but you're allowed to live here. You're not a second-class citizen. We honor you. You're made in God's image. And if you consider yourself a Muslim or an atheist or whatever you consider yourself, you're welcome here. And as long as you do not violate the fundamental tenets of the social contract of what it is to be an American, that doesn't exist in much of the world. And it's horrible in places like India, where they're utterly tribalist. But to hear about it in Israel, that's where it gets confusing, because we're told over and over, oh, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel, blah, 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 blah. Israel is secular. If Israel is secular, in other words, if you can be a Jew, an ethnic Jew, who rejects God 100%, they don't have a problem with that. But if you accept Jesus, they have a problem with that. Is that what we're dealing with here, and why?
Well, yeah. I mean, it is an ethno-nationalist state. It's hard for people to hear. That's true. At the Vulnerable People Project, we defend vulnerable minorities facing ethnic cleansing and genocide, ecclesiocide. These are different things. We defend the Yazidi. We work with the Uyghur. But as a Christian, Paul in his letters, 70% of the time he tells us to pray and fast. It's for the persecuted church. And I wonder who Paul was talking to that wasn't persecuted. I mean, they were all being persecuted. Who wasn't being persecuted? But he was emphasizing that we as believers should live our lives in solidarity with the persecuted church. The great Catholic Bishop Fulton Sheen said the foundation of solidarity in the world is Christians' love for each other around the world. And of course, as Christians, we love the Yazidi. We love the Uyghur. We'll defend Muslims. We defend Jews. We're repulsed by anti-Semitism and anti-Arab bigotry and hatred and all vile ethnic and nationalist ideologies that lead to violence and hatred. But as Christians and as citizens of the United States of America, we're influential, we're wealthy, we have a lot of weight to throw around. And I think we should throw it around and demand that our co-religionists are protected from violence. And that's why, the next several months, I'll be in the region, all over the region, visiting the most vulnerable Christian communities in the world. And, praise God for this ceasefire. I wrote an article around Christmas time called The Last Christmas in Bethlehem, where I argued that the way things are unfolding in the Middle East, if they continue this way, it'll be definitely the last Christmas in northern Gaza, the last Christmas in Damascus, the last Christmas in Bethlehem. But thanks to President Trump, it looks like the Christian communities in Gaza will be salvaged. Pray God the violence doesn't spread and the war doesn't spread to the West Bank. And now we do have a real concern in Syria. How is this ball going to bounce in Syria? People are hopeful right now, but the people running Syria were selling sex slaves a couple of years ago. And Jelani is on, there's a $10 million reward for him, yet members of our State Department are going to meet with him. So is Syria
Wait a
going to
minute.
bounce?
So this is, I was under the impression that Assad, as awful as he was, protected Christian minorities in Syria.
And he's gone. So
Right.
Jelani, who is an Islamist, who was selling Yazidi sex slaves just a few years ago, and there's a $10 million reward for him, as having members of our State Department go meet with him. Now, the Christians in Syria are hopeful. I've talked to people in our State Department, and they say we have reason to be hopeful. And I'll tell you, I obviously it's not unreasonable for us to be really concerned about the Christian communities in Syria after we saw what happened in Iraq. And so right now, as Christians, we really need to be vigilant to advocate for our co-religionists. And it really is those first century Christian communities from Sudan, Egypt, across the Middle East, into across Artsakh and into India. It's amazing how in just 100 years the gospel of Jesus Christ spread so far and churches were planted. It's as if the devil is trying to rip up the oldest Christian communities in the world. And we in the West, and it is a mystery to me why we in the West have been silent at the persecution that these ancient Christian communities are suffering.
Well, there's many reasons for it because I think it is confusing to most people. You can only take in so much, but it seems to me that Trump ought to be all over this. I mean, one thing that makes him such an extraordinary leader is he knows how to use power. When you have power and leverage to actually use it, and it seems that with regard to any of the nations you've just mentioned, but especially with Israel, he needs to understand this issue and use it. And so I guess you think that he will, that he is and he will.
I'm very confident. We saw it in Iraq. What I love, and when I'm in the region and I tell people, they ask me about President Trump, what do I think about President Trump? I say, you know what he is? He's a normal human being. We're not used to that from our elite and our establishment. He is a normal human being who loves life. He loves people, and he doesn't pick sides when he loves Jews, he loves Arabs. He doesn't see that this is competing. He doesn't see competition in this. He recognizes that they have shared interests and that history has planted history has planted landmines. We need to dig those landmines up and plant olive trees. Trump loves life, loves family, hates war. He's repulsed by war. Going back decades, he's
Hang on
repulsed
a
by.
second, folks. We'll be right back. We're talking to our friend Jason Jones, who is in Bethlehem right now. Don't go away. Folks, welcome back. Talking to my friend Jason Jones, who is in Bethlehem. I can't believe it, in Israel. Unbelievable. Jason, yesterday, I've never commented on Andrew Tate before. He really makes me sick. He says a lot of great stuff, but honestly, Hitler said a lot of great stuff. Like, I mean, like horrible,
80% of what everybody says is great.
evil people say some stuff that you go, I agree with that. So, but yesterday, I read a couple of things that he said that were so vile, so despicable. I commented on my Instagram. I don't normally do the kind of hot take on Instagram. I'm probably going to do more of that because it seems like I just hear so I read something about he said about women, and I thought, what a pig. Like, what do you say? You just say, what a total pig. I want to punch him in the face. Like, what is wrong with him? And you realize, like, there are young men, many young Christian men following this buffoon. I mean, because he says enough stuff they agree with, and because the church is so feminized that they're looking for strong masculine, and this is what they get. And it's just horrifying. So I posted this thing on my Instagram account yesterday, and I'm going to talk in hour two. I'm talking to my friend Larry Taunton. We already recorded that a day or two ago. But do you have any take on Andrew? I'm just horrified that things are so bad that young men are following this guy.
Eric, one of my favorite books, it's actually my favorite memoir, is Fish Out of Water. And I listened to the Audible book just so I could hear your voice, so I could hear the wonderful characters that you had the privilege of being around as a young man. And I look at the men that I was exposed to as a young man, hardworking, manly men. Andrew Tate is actually very feminine. You can take testosterone replacement therapy, you can shave your body, you can spend a lot of time in the gym, you can get manicures and pedicures. What is manly is going into the local pregnancy center to help with the plumbing on your weekend off. It's taking a second job so you can help your sister, pay for her child's private school. It's volunteering to do prison ministry. It's sacrificial love. This is what manliness is. It's building a business and working hard to make payroll so you can employ people and give opportunities in your community. This sort of narcissistic, self-obsessed idea, what they call, masculinity, it's not manliness. And so it's sad, as you said,
He's a
that
boy. Let's be honest. He's a chest
young.
beating, chest thumping boy
Yeah,
masquerading as a man. A real
he's
man has dignity and honor and honors women and
yes.
honors self-sacrifice. And so some of the stuff that he says, it's so despicable. It's just unbelievable to me. And I think people, serious Christians, need to reject him totally, totally reject him. And so I'm sorry. I guess I learned that Candace Owens and Benny Johnson, I love Benny Johnson. Wow, but they have interviewed him and I guess didn't push back on some of this really sick stuff that he has said. So I felt like a need to speak up.
I think that's sort of the problem too. I didn't see Benny Johnson or Candace's interviews, but we deal with these people with kid gloves, and I don't think there's a problem with interviewing him. I think it's a real opportunity to maybe exemplify and educate him with hard-hitting questions and by pushing back. In fact, he left Christianity for Islam because he thought Christianity was effeminate. And in fact,
Hold on. Let me point something out. Do you know who else had that view of Christianity? You ready? Adolf Hitler.
yeah,
Not kidding. Not kidding. Adolf Hitler felt Christianity is a weak, now it's a misunderstanding of Christianity because true warrior strength is different. You are there to protect the weak, to protect the vulnerable, to protect women, to protect children, whatever. And if you're a Darwinist, you worship power and strength. You're the opposite of that. So how interesting that you just told me
and
that.
And Nietzsche as well, right, thought of Christianity as an effeminate religion for the weak. What Rene Girard teaches us is to be when you stand in solidarity with the vulnerable, you are perceived as vulnerable by the mob, by the crowd. So it makes sense that when you are serving the weak, the ignorant will look at you and think that you're weak. When you stand next to a woman caught in the act of adultery, you've made yourself extremely vulnerable, but that's manliness, that's strength. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel of Jesus Christ is kissing lepers. Anyone can take testosterone replacement therapy. Well, not anyone. I guess you'd have to be affluent. You'd have to be an affluent Westerner with a lot of leisure time where you can go to the gym, get your body waxed, take anabolic steroids, get a ring light and make video content. But can you kiss a leper? Can you wake up early in the morning and coach wrestling and drive across the state with a bus full of boys? Can you go down to the old folks' home and play checkers every Friday
I
night, even
mean,
though you're
Jason,
tired?
the most manly thing, if there's any young man ever listening to this program, I would say the most manly thing you could possibly do is marry a woman, love her until death do you part, have children with her, love them, raise them. That is the hardest thing. And whatever garbage people like Andrew Tate are selling is a joke, a cheap joke. Raising a family, staying married, marriage is tough. Two human beings are involved in marriage. Staying married, loving your spouse, that that is what God honors. That's what I saw in my father. That is God's will ultimately. Maybe it's not for everybody, but most young men, you want a purpose to live, it's like get a job, take life seriously, find a woman to love and love her for the rest of your life. What Andrew Tate is selling is so vile, and it makes a commodity of women, which is despicable. Anybody who does that, I just say, like, you have contempt for my daughter and my wife and my mother, and I have contempt for you. And so I just felt the need to comment on this because
Well, and I'd like
it's
to
just
I'd like to say one more thing. My hobby is mixed martial arts. My office is actually in a mixed martial arts gym. It's what I love since I was a boy. I kickbox and like to lift weights. That's fun to me. You know what's hard? I have dysentery right now. I've been traveling across the Middle East. I'm going to fly home in a week or so. And the day I land after a 20-hour flight, I have to take my son camping with his Troops of St. George troop. That's hard.
It's harder than smoking a cigar in a
Lifting
Silk Robe.
weights,
We'll be
drinking
right back. We
whiskey
got
under a ring light.
Another segment with Jason Jones. Jason, hang on. Forgive me. Thank you. Folks, welcome back. Talking to my friend, Jason Jones. Jason, you were making a point. We're talking about what is real manhood, and you were making a point. I had to go to the break. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, like, I love that President Trump just said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is about to become the national sport of America, surpassing baseball. I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. My whole family does it. I think it's great. My office is actually in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym. This is fun for me. I think it's great. I wish everyone did it. I love Muay Thai kickboxing, love lifting weights. I have whey protein and supplements all in my house, but this is not what makes me a man. What makes me a man is I've got dysentery right now. I'm traveling across the Middle East. And then after this trip is over, I'm flying home 20 hours, getting off a plane, going home, grabbing my son to go on his camping trip with it's the Troops of St. George. It's like a Christian Cub Scouts. And, and would I rather just go home and binge watch a TV show with my wife and drink wine and eat in bed after this long trip? Yes, but no, it means the world to my son that I go camping with him, and I'm gonna be glad I do it when I'm there. But it's sad to me. It's sad to me that young men have been given so few models of manliness that they look to Andrew Tate. And what's even sadder is there's so many Christian influencers that sort of meme the Andrew Tate behavior. And I think they do it because they want to be attractive, they want to be relevant. But at the end of the day, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how we show young men, they all should listen to your book, Fish Out of Water, how we show young men that, the manliest guy in town is never going to use the word manliness or masculinity. Manly men don't talk about how masculine they are. They don't talk about manliness. They work really hard. They serve their community. They're in the Rotary Club. They're in the Lions Club. And they run their businesses. They're hardworking. They volunteer at their church. This is what it is to be a man. And sadly, young men have been given no role models. And they have been, let's be honest, young men are aggrieved in our culture. And so they look to someone like Andrew Tate as someone who's their advocate because they've been aggrieved. Get over it, you're a man. Who cares? Like you said, I became a father at 18 through an irresponsible act, but that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I once said to my wife, everything good in my life came from a teen pregnancy. And she said, no, everything good in your life came to you because of how you responded to that teen pregnancy. And so to your point, Eric Metaxas, find a woman, love her, have a family, serve your community, serve your church. This is what it is to be a man. Be humble, which is very hard to me. Be meek, which is very hard for me. Bas Rutten is a good friend of mine, UFC legend. And Bas Rutten said the manliest thing one can do is be meek. And I'm not there yet. But I don't think that Andrew Tate's meek,
Well, I'll tell you, meek, it's a bad word because the actual Greek word, when Jesus talks about, the meek, it means strength bridled. The ultimate example of that for me, and it's the first chapter in my book, Seven Men, George Washington. I recommend my book, Seven Men, because it's 7 examples of extraordinary, genuine manhood, not fake cartoon manhood like Andrew Tate. George Washington was the ultimate. Unbelievable passions, unbelievable strength and talent. And he learned through the course of his life to bridle that talent for God's purposes. And he became one of the greatest human beings to live in history, accomplished more than anybody. He was not a father, but he was a father to stepkids. He was a father to his country. It's so powerful. Jason Jones, we're out of time. Just a huge blessing, my brother, to talk to you. I cannot believe you're talking to us from Bethlehem. God bless you for all you're doing. We'll be catching up with you in the weeks ahead. So thanks for coming on. I know it's very, very early in Bethlehem in Israel.
Well, thank you very much, Eric Metaxas. Thank you for always sharing your platform with the most vulnerable people in the world. I'm really grateful to you. And our website's vulnerablepeopleproject.com, where people can go and see where we are and what we're doing.
vulnerablepeopleproject.com. Thank you.